Greetings, brothers and sisters in Christ. We begin the great and holy season of Lent. The first Sunday of Lent is important. The Church is getting us back to the basics, if you will, as we begin our journey towards Easter. I always like to think that Catholics kind of kick in gear during Lent. There's something about the season that draws us. There's something that draws us deeper into the Lord's suffering and dying for us so that we can be ready for his resurrection when Easter comes around. The Church begins this year. The first reading brings us all the way back to the beginning, the book of Genesis. And we hear the second story of creation, where God formed us out of the clay of the ground, and then God blew God's breath into us, and that's how we came alive. So one way to understand the human person is one in whom the breath of God has been placed. And you might believe that as we breathe in and out, it's God's breath and God's spirit that's helping us to stay alive. It sustains us. And then we see that God planted a garden in the middle of the earth. And in that garden, God planted the man and woman whom he had formed. It's important for us to know the reason why God made us. So in the Garden of Eden, we see God's original purpose was to be in communion with God, to be a friend of God. We had everything we needed. As long as we depended on God and looked to God and kept that friendship, we had life in abundance. The Church Fathers say that the garden is symbolic of the human being fully alive, or even the human being at play. We can be carefree because we are someplace safe. And then we hear the story of the fall. In that garden, there was only one prohibition from God. Do not eat the fruit of the tree of good and evil. In other words, God is the one who gets to determine what is right and what is wrong, not us. So we know that the original sin is when we begin to take the place of God, and we begin to decide for ourselves what is right and what is wrong. We get off track, if you will. The relationship gets broken and severed. And we find that there's a snake in the garden. The snake or the serpent is not the enemy of God. The serpent is a creature. The serpent we look at as being Satan, who is tempting our early ancestors. The serpent is not the equal opposite of God. It is a creature created by God. And that's what we believe of Satan. Satan was an angel who fell, not the equal opposite of God. And what does the serpent do? Catch us at our weakest moments and puts in us the temptation. If you eat that fruit, you will be like God. Well, remember a chapter earlier in Genesis, we were created in the image and likeness of God. So we are already in the likeness of God. We don't need to eat the fruit. So the tempter does that. Satan makes us forget who we are and whose we are. So in listening to Satan, we take the fruit, and original sin happens. Adam and Eve are banished from the garden, not that God is punishing them, but that's the natural result of when you break your relationship with God. Then let's jump quickly to the gospel. The first Sunday of Lent, we always hear about the temptations. Jesus goes into the desert to find us because that's where we went after we lost the Garden of Eden. He goes into the desert to confront Satan so that he will no longer have power over us. He faces his temptations of power and worldly pleasure and all those things, and he faces that to deny Satan, to allow us a way to come back into friendship with God. So during this Lenten season, stay close to Christ and renew your communion and friendship with God. Have a blessed season.